first question is, could you tell me your name and how you became friends with Elvis Presley?
Sure. My name is George Klein. I'm a Memphis, Tennessee radio and TV guy, disc jockey for a million years here in Memphis, and have a TV show now called Memphis Sounds with George Klein. And Elvis and I met in high school in the 8th grade. It was a music class, and Christmas was approaching, and the teacher said instead of studying music lessons next week, we're going to do Christmas carols. And Elvis asked the teacher if he could bring his guitar to school and sing, and she said yeah, and he got up in front of the class that day, the next week, and he sang 2 songs. He sang Cold, Cold, Icy Fingers, and he sang Old Ship. And I was totally impressed, and that was a bonding where I met Elvis, and we went all the way through high school with the same exact grades. I became senior class president, and got out of high school, and I started working in radio and TV in Memphis. He started recording and traveled with him for a year before he went in the Army, and I was in 8 of his movies, little bitty parts, minor parts, what they call silent bits or something to that effect. And then when he went in the Army, I went back into radio and television, and when he got married, I was a groomsman at his wedding. When I got married, he was the best man at my wedding, and when he passed away, I was one of the pallbearers at his funeral.
Next question is, could you share a story about Elvis's generosity? I've heard of that. He was very generous.
Yeah, Elvis was generous to a fault. I mean, man, he'd give you the shirt off his back. He was just so, if you said, Elvis, that's a beautiful ring. Well, let me see your ring. I'll swap with you. If you said, Elvis, what a wonderful watch. He said, you want it? He give it to you. You know, and then he gave away, he must have given away over a couple hundred cars over his career. And he was just very generous, and he was very charity-minded. He was just a great guy.
I noticed a little while ago you were signing a book for people. Could you tell me a little bit about the book you wrote?
Yeah, my book just came out this past year, Carey, and it's called Elvis, My Best Man, and it's for sale. If your bookstore doesn't have it, you can call it off the internet. Just go to Amazon.com. Book is doing very well for me. It's in about 6th or 7th printing. It's overseas in Germany, in German. It's in England, and it's called actually My Life with Elvis, and through high school and things I've just told you, a lot bit more in detail in the book. It's a really good book. It went #1 in America on Kindle, and I'm very proud of the book.
Could you tell me where you were and what you were doing when you heard Elvis had passed away?
I was in radio and TV in Memphis, but I was freelancing for a theme park called Libertyland. And I got a call, and they said, the radio station called, said, GK, we just got a bulletin from United Press that Elvis has passed away. And I said, oh, I don't believe that. You know, a couple of weeks ago that happened. He was in a hospital, and he got a bulletin, and it wasn't for real. They said, well, can you check it out? Well, no sooner than I hung that phone up, I had 5 more calls there. They were all for me, and every one of them was asking about that. So I took one of the phones off the hook, and I called Graceland, and I got Mr. Presley's girlfriend, Sandy, on the phone. I said, Sandy, this is George Klein. Is it true about Elvis? She said, yes, and you need to get out here as fast as you can. And man, I was in a state of shock right there, and I couldn't walk, couldn't say anything, couldn't talk. So I went out and jumped in my car and drove 100 miles an hour to Graceland, walked in, and Mr. Presley was there, and there was turmoil in the little room off the kitchen, and everybody was crying and hugging each other. You just couldn't believe it. And Mr. Presley said, George, we've lost him. And I said, Mr. Presley, I said, you know, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe they pulled him through by the grace of God. He said, so about that time, Dr. Nick walked in, the doctor. He said, would y'all gather around me? We gathered around Dr. Nick. He said, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to tell you that Elvis Presley passed away this afternoon.
3 girls were hit by a drunk driver outside of Graceland. Did you guys have that knowledge when it happened, or was it later that you heard about it?
Well, let me see. Of course, he died. When he died, that's when they were at the gate. That's what happened. The guy crashed a car into the crowd at the gate, and yes, we heard about it right away.
Billy Stanley was telling me that the procession was insane. He said there was people lined up all down the streets. Could you tell me a little bit about the funeral procession?
Yeah, I think there were 16 white limousines, and we went down to the Forest Hill Cemetery, which is about 7 or 8 miles north of Graceland. Oh, yeah, north of Graceland, and they were lined up and down the highways, 2 or 3 deep. People listening on transistor radios to the news and watching us, and they were waving and blowing kisses and all. It was a very, very moving situation for me.
Down to the last 3, I meant to do this one earlier. Could you tell me about a prank that Elvis pulled on somebody? Because everybody's telling me that Elvis was a huge prankster.
Well, the biggest and funniest prank he ever pulled was in Las Vegas. It's a long story, but I'll shorten it down for you. Some guy was coming in, I think, to join the Stamps Quartet, a new guy, and Elvis had some of his guys go get some guns with blanks in them, not real bullets. And as we came up to his suite that night after his show, these guys jumped out from behind the counter with masks on or whatever and said, started shooting, and they thought it was real bullets. Everybody started diving for the floor and running like crazy. And Elvis dove on the floor. He was in on the deal, and J.D. Sumner was laying on top of him to try to protect him. And J.D. said he didn't know if he thought Elvis was crying, but Elvis was laughing. At that moment, he knew it was a prank, and he got up. But it was a pretty wild scene.
Would you tell or basically welcome my fans to Elvis Week 2013?
Welcome what?
Would you welcome the viewers of Walking on the Boulevard to Elvis Week 2013?
Yeah. This is George Klein, and I want to welcome all the Elvis fans from Walking on the Boulevard to Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, Elvis Week 2013.
Last question. Is there anything about Elvis's death that I didn't ask you that you think is important for me to add into my documentary?
Well, it was a terrible moment in history. It's a moment that I'm sure almost every American who was middle-aged at that time or any young person, they knew exactly where they were and what they were doing when they heard the news that Elvis Presley died. It was a tragic moment because I lost a great friend, the fans lost a great talent, and the world lost a great person.
I really appreciate you doing this.